So wrapping up this section, we're going to take some time to have a look at the classification of athletes, as well as some general information that is important for you as a judge of Scotia Series competitions. So we're going to begin with the classification of athletes, both human and equine, and this isn't necessarily the cut in stone classification, but this is the way that we as judges in the industry work with our athletes to respect who they are, where they are, and what they're doing. So we have athletes competing on an even playing field for their level of experience as well as their discipline. So first off, the discipline, obviously we have English and Western in Scotia Series, and for the divisions of showmanship as well as dressage, they can be both English and Western. There's Western dressage as well as English dressage, and for showmanship classes they can be competing as English or Western. We can classify athletes by their sport, so obviously riders, drivers, their level of experience, and this is both for the horse as well as the human athlete. So green horse, these are less experienced horses in their first years of competition, are novice riders or drivers. And sometimes you will also have them classified walk and trot jog classes, and these may be for the under saddle, these may be for novice riders, for green horses, as well as the active for life athletes who choose to enter competitions but are not comfortable cantering or loping. We can obviously classify by size, so we can have ponies, horses, as well as miniature horses. And along those same lines, well, we don't have classifications separate to the sizing, but we certainly, when you're judging hunters, we look at the striding. So ponies are going to have a shorter stride than horses, and we're going to discuss this when we get into the course design at the end of the whole course. And modified is where we allow a slightly smaller stride to occur, and we judge them fairly based on that. We can also classify our athletes by their age, the human athletes by their age. So juniors are up to 18, seniors are 18 and over, small fry are 10 and under, and then select are 50 and over. These are all classified based on their age on January 1st of the year, so that they are competing through the whole season as the same age as they were at the beginning of the season. Obviously, we have competition levels as well that we classify our athletes under, and they could be for the height of the fences, for hunters, for jumpers, as well as hunt seat equitation, the level of competition that the athlete chooses to compete in, and for our dressage, they may be training, they may be walk trot, they may be first level, second level, and onwards. Western dressage, they may be at introductory, basic level, level 1, 2, 3, 4. We can also classify athletes as para-athletes, and these are athletes with a physical or sensory impairment. They are still judged as athletes under the same rules. However, they may be afforded the use of compensating aids, which are listed on the FEI or EC classification profile that they will need to have. If they're competing in para-dressage, they will be required to have a para-dressage certificate profile. And then finally, we may have riders competing as hors concours, and these are riders or drivers who, for whatever reason, they have chosen to enter the competition but are not being judged. They may not be qualified, they may be in a conflict of interest, but they have paid their entry fee. They're coming into school in the class, and it is up to the competition committee to choose whether they're going to allow people to compete hors concours. If they are competing in a class that requires an individual entry, so the over fences classes or dressage classes, anything with a pattern, these riders or drivers will be coming into the ring as your final entry. You will, however, not be judging them, and they will not be seen on your judge's card. So, clarifying some issues on the helmet rule, the Nova Scotia Equestrian Federation does require the use of a well-fitting, fully approved riding helmet at all times for all athletes. These are the ASTM approved or SEI approved helmets, and they are required for all riders and drivers. There is, however, one provision for adult athletes competing in the Western Performance Division to choose to participate with a cowboy hat rather than the approved riding helmet. And if they choose to do this, they may do so, but they are required to sign a waiver that stays with the competition committee and stays on file, and it is a recognition of agreement of the risk that they are taking. However, as a judge, it's really important that you respect the fact that under no circumstances shall judges ever penalize an athlete for wearing a helmet in these divisions. So accidents can certainly happen. We're in a high-risk sport, and we're dealing with typically the less experienced athletes, so they're at the stage in their learning that they're learning to compete, they're learning to deal with the challenges of competition. So we need to be prepared for what can happen. When you arrive at the competition grounds, you will have checked, as I said earlier, that they have an EAP, an emergency action plan, in place. And this is going to speak to where the first aid kit is, who's going to take charge, who has first aid training, who's going to call the ambulance, who's going to give an ambulance directions to find the location. All of these details need to be in place ahead of time so people aren't rushing around panicked on what to do with the situation. The individual who is in charge of seeing the implementation of the EAP is the safety officer, and that individual needs to be named. If for some reason they have to leave the property during the competition, they need to inform the officials who will be acting in their place. Your responsibility as the judge is not to apply any first aid. Your responsibility is to the competition and maintaining a fair competition situation for all athletes, to keep it safe and to keep it professional. So in the case of a rider coming off in the ring during a class, you may need to hold up the class. You're going to have to think on your feet and be aware of a safe and logical way to handle the situation. Because if you're mid-class, that class technically is still being judged while that accident is being taken care of, while a rider possibly is being brought out of the ring or waiting for emergency personnel to come and provide assistance to them. So you need to really think about a fair way to deal with your other athletes that are in the ring that is going to keep the competition fair, but also keep the competition moving, and recognize that when riders, particularly novice riders, see somebody fall off and possibly get hurt, it is very rattling to them. So just simply picking up and carrying on with the class needs to be done with a little bit of tact and a little bit of forethought. Also, the horses, once they've seen a horse act up, maybe the rider came off, the horse is loose, running around, goofing, you need to be aware of the safety of the other athletes that may be in the ring, to make sure their horses are safe, and take care of that so you don't get into a sort of domino effect with the accident. But certainly, if you have a rider that is rendered unconscious or complaining of back pain, they are not to be moved. I think we all know this, but sometimes a rider can come off, they pop to their feet, you know that they're fine, they're going to continue on with the next classes for the rest of the day. But any rider that is either unconscious or complaining of back pain, Your class, your ring will be tied up until qualified medical help has arrived and given whatever assistance is necessary to the athlete. There is a conversation taking place now within the competition committee to create a solid scenario for accidents, a return to play policy for competitions and for individuals in the case of accidents. So keep your eye on that, and hopefully in the near future you will find something within the Scotia Series rules on the process of return to play, whether this rider that came off that maybe does have a mild concussion or does have a body injury that you're unaware of, should we be letting them back in the ring for other classes for the rest of the day? You know, how are we going to deal with it from a safety standpoint? So keep your eye open for that policy and what's coming forward on that. So the next area of conversation that we need to have is around the topic of conflict of interest. We as judges are being hired by a competition to come and judge with a fair and impartial perspective on the performance of the athletes. And conflict of interest can occur. It can be actual. In other words, it is real conflict of interest, or it can be perceived. It can be the best intentions of judging fairly and impartially, but yet you are in a position of conflict when you are judging specific athletes. So these may be anything that are business related. Maybe you're a coach and these are people that you're working with, you're coaching, you're training their horses. You can have business dealings with them as far as buying, selling horses. You could also, if you own a facility and you're boarding horses, you may be in a conflict of interest position. And it's also familiar relations. So anybody that you are related to or that you have close ties and close friendship to. It can also be athletes, you know, when you're traveling to compete and you're staying in the home of an athlete, all of these become potential conflict of interests. So our job as the judge is to avoid these situations at all cost. It is difficult, however, when you are being judged to judge a competition such as the Nova Scotia Equestrian Federation Scotia Series, because we typically are residents of Nova Scotia when we're judging these competitions. It's not like large national competitions when they're hiring judges from a great distance away. These are local competitions and we are hiring local judges to judge them. So as such, you need to be very aware of when the potential for conflict of interest exists, and let people know, let the athletes know if that's, you know, a student of yours that wants to go compete at a competition, let them know in advance that you will be judging that competition and it's not appropriate for them to be there. Also, if you find yourself in a conflict of interest position, at least let the competition organizers know that the situation does exist and they can choose to do something about it. So you want to avoid these situations wherever possible. And, you know, there's a lot that we can do as far as awareness. If you're traveling to another part of the province, more than likely you're not going to be judging anybody that you have coached or anybody that you have a business relationship with on a day-to-day basis. But this is a small province, and you may find situations where you are judging at a competition and there's a horse there that you bred or you sold. There are riders there that maybe you rode with in the past, or maybe they're children of riders that you rode with in the past. So you need to be aware of these situations and be as impartial as is possible. We have avoided up until now having a hard and fast rule for conflict of interest because of the small geographic nature of the province and the fact that we're trying very hard to keep the costs of these competitions down. So we want to avoid having to bring in judges from a great distance away. But it's important. The NSEF is certainly listening to feedback, and we want to try to keep ourselves as fair and as impartial as possible. Generally, if you are a coach, you don't want to be judging athletes that you have coached in the last 30 days. And nor should you be having any active business dealings with athletes. So this may be, the buying and selling of horses. If it's a horse that you sold 2 years ago, that's not a big deal. But at a competition, when you're in the position of a judge, you want to avoid these conversations, and you want to try to stay away from this sort of thing in the days leading up to and the days following a competition, because that is a clear conflict of interest. So taking a quick look at the judge training and development requirements, these are available through the NSEF, but just to quickly go over them again, you are required to be obviously an NSEF member in good standing, 19 years of age or older, and be able to illustrate a knowledge or experience with competition. You'll have a look at what that means in a moment. You need to have completed both the course and the evaluation for foundation judges, and you will need to have some sort of judging experience, and there's two options here. One, if you're an experienced judge, that you have judged at least 5 competitions in the past 5 years. If you are coming to this new to judging, you need to have had at least 36 hours volunteering at a Scotia Series competition. Certainly EC competitions, breed competitions, NRHA competitions, these are fine as well. You need to be able to illustrate that you have completed 36 hours of volunteer time in any capacity running competitions as the show secretary, scribing for a judge, announcing course building rules, ring steward, these sorts of things, as well as completing 2 mentoring forms, so that's a minimum of 12 hours, with an NSEF approved mentor, and that list will be available through the NSEF office. So the capacity here is for people who have no experience or minimal experience judging. That's how you're going to come to it. If you do have experience judging, you'll be able to come into the program once you have illustrated that you have judged at least 5 competitions in the past 5 years. As well, you will need to sign and adhere to the NSEF Scotia Series Officials Code of Conduct. As well, you will be required as of March 1st, 2021, to have completed both the concussion awareness as well as the safe sport requirements, so making headway in sport for concussion awareness and respect in sport for safe sport requirement. These are recommended now, but as of March 1st, 2021, they will be required. So just moving through the course, I just want to cover a few more points. First off, keep in mind as you go through that you're going to see all kinds of photographs. I especially thank Pam McKenzie for the use of her photographs. A lot of these are ones that she's taken. They do not necessarily reflect competition ideals. So the purpose when we were pulling all of this together was not necessarily to show you what is the ideal, but it's likely what you're going to be seeing and dealing with in the Scotia Series competitions. Having said that, we are looking to compile both videos and photographs for training purposes for this program. So if you have anything that you feel would be a good teaching tool for new officials, judges coming up through the program, that would be fantastic if you could submit them for the training purposes. We need to keep in mind that if we are using images of athletes, we need their permission, and we will only use photographs of riders and drivers that are wearing helmets. As your learning continues, we all need to feel free to reach out and ask questions. If you have a question regarding anything in this program, or you're hired to judge a show and you walk away with a question, contact somebody, reach out to another judge in the program. If you don't know who to contact, who to talk to, get in touch with the NSEF office, and they will certainly know the individual that would be most appropriate for you to contact with your questions. It's from asking questions that we gain a better idea on what needs to be covered in this program. So remember to stay professional, keep learning, and help build this program. It's what you put into the program that's going to help make it stronger. So we're going to move on into the Western Performance Division, which is the first competition division of the Officials Development Program.